Imagine you are playing a game of Monopoly where one player has a printing press hidden under the table. While you trade your labor and property for colorful slips of paper, they simply create more whenever they start to lose. This is not just a game, it is the global financial reality that would make Adam Smith turn in his grave. Today we peel back the curtain on the most sophisticated wealth extraction engine ever devised. The story begins on a cold November night in 1910 when a private train car left New Jersey under a shroud of absolute secrecy. The passengers were the world's most powerful bankers, traveling under aliases to avoid detection by the press or the public. They were heading to a remote location called Jekyll Island, not to vacation, but to draft a plan that would fundamentally alter the DNA of the American economy. Their goal was to create a central bank that appeared to be a government entity, but was in its very essence a private cartel designed to protect the interests of the banking elite at the expense of the common man. Adam Smith famously wrote about the invisible hand of the market, where real value is created through productivity and labor. However, what happened on Jekyll Island was the creation of a visible fist. These men knew that if the public understood they were handing over the control of the money supply to a group of private creditors, there would be a revolution. So they wrapped their plan in the language of public service and stability. They called it the Federal Reserve Act, a name designed to sound official and safe, even though it was neither federal nor did it hold any real reserves. When the act was finally pushed through a sleepy Congress in late December 1913, most representatives had already left for the holidays. This was a calculated move to ensure minimal resistance to a law that effectively outsourced the sovereignty of the nation's currency. Adam Smith would have viewed this as a total betrayal of free market principles, as it established a monopoly over the most important commodity in existence, money itself. By controlling the supply of money, these private interests gained the power to dictate the economic destiny of millions of people without a single vote. The genius of this deception lies in its complexity. Most people believe the Federal Reserve is a branch of the government like the Department of Treasury, but it is actually a network of private banks with shareholders. These shareholders are not the American people. They are the very financial institutions that the Fed is supposed to regulate. This creates a permanent conflict of interest where the fox is not just guarding the henhouse, but is actually the architect who built the fence. It is a closed loop of power that ensures the house always wins, regardless of the economic climate outside. We must understand that this system was built on a foundation of intellectual dishonesty. They argued that a central bank was necessary to prevent bank runs and financial panics, yet the century that followed its creation has been marked by more frequent and more severe economic collapses than ever before. Each crisis, ironically, has served as a pretext to give the Federal Reserve even more power and more control over the lives of everyday citizens. It is a self-perpetuating cycle of failure that rewards the arsonist for putting out the fire with more gasoline. In a truly free market, as envisioned by classical economists, banks would be subject to the same risks as any other business. If they manage money poorly, they fail. But the Federal Reserve eliminated this accountability for the top tier of the financial pyramid. By acting as the lender of last resort, they ensured that the biggest players could take unlimited risks, knowing that the public would ultimately foot the bill. This is not capitalism. It is a system of privatized gains and socialized losses that extracts the lifeblood of the productive class to subsidize the reckless elite. To see the fraud clearly, one must look at the legal structure of the currency itself. A Federal Reserve note is not money in the traditional sense. It is a debt instrument. It is a promise to pay that is backed by nothing but the government's ability to tax its citizens in the future. When the Fed issues new currency, it does so by purchasing government bonds, which means every dollar in circulation is birthed with an attached interest payment. We are literally trading our future labor for the privilege of using a medium of exchange that is designed to lose its value over time. This leads us to the most profound realization of all. If all debts were paid, there would be no money left in circulation. The entire system is a mathematical impossibility that requires constant growth and constant borrowing just to stay afloat. It is a treadmill that moves faster every year, forcing the average person to work longer and harder just to maintain the same standard of living. This is the mechanism of the fraud, a hidden tax that never appears on a ballot, but is felt every time you walk into a grocery store or pay your monthly rent. The mechanical heart of this fraud is a process known as fractional reserve banking, a system where banks are allowed to lend out money they do not actually have. When the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, it encourages commercial banks to create a flood of new credit out of thin air. This artificial expansion of the money supply devalues every other dollar already in existence. If a private citizen did this, it would be called counterfeiting, but when the banking cartel does it, it is called monetary policy. This is the ultimate sleight of hand in human history. Adam Smith argued that for a market to function, prices must reflect reality, yet the Fed's primary job is to distort those prices. By manipulating the cost of borrowing, they send false signals to the entire economy, leading to massive malinvestments. People buy houses they cannot afford, and businesses expand into sectors that have no real demand, all because the money feels cheap. But the bill always comes due, and when the bubble inevitably bursts, the Fed uses the chaos to further consolidate wealth into the hands of those who are closest to the printing press. If this debt is money cycle feels rigged to you, drop a reveal in the comments so we know you are seeing the pattern. We need to get the algorithm to push this truth to more people who are still asleep. The more we talk about the mechanics of this system, the less power it has over our collective future. This is not just about finance. It is about the fundamental freedom to own the fruits of your labor without them being slowly bled away by a central authority that no one ever voted for. Every time the Fed clicks a button to create $1 billion, they are essentially stealing the purchasing power from your savings account. This is why a house that cost $10,000 in the 1950s now costs $500,000. The house has not changed. The value of the currency has simply been destroyed. This is a deliberate feature of the system, not a bug. By keeping the population in a constant state of financial insecurity, the architects of this system ensure that people remain compliant and dependent on the very structures that are impoverishing them. The transition from real money to debt-based currency has created a society that prioritizes short-term consumption over long-term stability. In a world of sound money, people are encouraged to save and invest in the future. In a world of Federal Reserve notes, savers are punished by inflation, forcing everyone into the casino of the stock market just to keep their heads above water. This shift has eroded the moral fabric of our economy, replacing the dignity of honest work with the frantic pursuit of speculative gains in a rigged financial environment. This brings us to the concept of the stealth tax, otherwise known as inflation. While the government claims that 2% inflation is a sign of a healthy economy, it actually represents a steady theft of your life's energy. Over a typical working career, a 2% annual loss in purchasing power will strip away a massive portion of your retirement nest egg. It is a silent thief that works while you sleep, ensuring that you can never truly escape the rat race. It is the most effective way to tax a population without them ever realizing they are being robbed. The middle class is the primary target of this extraction. The very wealthy can hide their assets in hard goods, real estate, and sophisticated hedges that benefit from the Fed's policies. The very poor are often subsidized by the state. But the working man and woman who trade their time for a fixed salary are left to bear the full weight of the devaluing dollar. They are the ones who see their grocery bills double while their wages remain stagnant. This is the reality of the Fed's mandate, hidden behind a curtain of academic jargon and complex charts. In the classical view of economics, money was supposed to be a stable store of value, usually linked to a physical commodity like gold. This provided a natural check on the power of kings and governments, as they could not spend money they did not have. But in 1971, the last guardrail was removed when the world's reserve currency was completely decoupled from gold. This was the moment the fraud became absolute. Without the tether of a physical asset, the Federal Reserve gained the power to create an infinite amount of currency with no accountability. This era of pure fiat money has led to what economists call the Cantillon effect. This principle states that the people closest to the money printer benefit the most, while those furthest away are the ones who suffer. By the time the newly created money reaches the hands of the plumber, the teacher, or the small business owner, the prices of goods and services have already risen to reflect the new supply. The banks and the government get to spend the money at its old value, while you are forced to spend it at its new, lower value. The result is a widening wealth gap that has reached levels not seen since the days of feudalism. This is not an accident of the market. It is the logical outcome of a system that allows a private entity to manufacture the medium of exchange. We are living through a massive redistribution of wealth, moving from the productive class to the financial class. Adam Smith's vision of a society where everyone can prosper through merit has been replaced by a system where prosperity is a function of how close you are to the source of the new money. We are halfway through the rabbit hole, and the picture is becoming clear. If you value this level of deep dive research into the systems that control our lives, hit the subscribe button and the bell right now. We do not have corporate sponsors, and we never will, because our loyalty is to the truth and to you. Your support is the only thing that keeps this channel independent and capable of calling out the most powerful institutions in the world. Let us continue our journey into the end game of this global deception. The Federal Reserve has effectively turned the global economy into a drug addict, and the drug is cheap credit. Every time the economy shows signs of slowing down, the Fed injects more liquidity, keeping the system alive, but making the eventual withdrawal much more painful. We have reached a point where the markets no longer react to real economic data. They only react to what the Fed says it will do with interest rates. This is the hallmark of a central planning system, the very thing that the defenders of the free market have fought against for centuries. Because interest rates have been suppressed for so long, we now have an economy filled with zombie companies, businesses that do not make enough profit to cover their debt payments and only survive by borrowing more. This prevents the natural process of creative destruction that Adam Smith believed was essential for progress. Instead of new efficient companies replacing old, failing ones, the Fed's policies keep the dead wood in place, dragging down the overall productivity of the nation. It is a recipe for long-term stagnation and eventual collapse. The boom and bust cycles that we are told are a natural part of capitalism are actually the breathing of the Federal Reserve. They expand the credit to create the boom, and then they contract it to trigger the bust. During the bust, they use the low prices to buy up real assets for pennies on the dollar. It is a massive harvest where the wealth of the public is vacuumed up by the very institutions that caused the instability in the first place. This cycle has been repeated so many times that it has become the standard operating procedure for the global elite. We are currently witnessing the final stages of this grand experiment. As the debt levels reach astronomical proportions, the Fed is finding it harder and harder to maintain the illusion. They are backed into a corner where they must either hyperinflate the currency to pay off the debt or allow a total deflationary collapse that would destroy the banking system. Neither option is good for the average person, but both will be used as justifications for the next phase of the plan, which is even more dangerous than the current system. The end game of this 100-year fraud is the introduction of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. This is the transition from paper fraud to programmable surveillance. In a world of digital currency issued directly by the Fed, every single transaction you make would be tracked, recorded, and potentially controlled. They would have the power to turn off your ability to spend if you do not comply with their mandates, or if your social credit score drops too low. This is the ultimate tool of social engineering, hidden behind the guise of convenience. Adam Smith believed that economic freedom was the foundation of all other freedoms. If you do not have the right to own and exchange value without the permission of a central authority, you are not truly free. The move toward a cashless society is the final step in the enclosure of the human spirit. It removes the last bit of privacy we have and hands it over to the very people who have spent the last century devaluing our labor and stealing our savings. We must recognize this for what it is, a digital prison being built around us. The good news is that once you see the fraud, you can begin to opt out. This means moving your wealth into real assets that the Fed cannot print, such as gold, silver, land, or decentralized technologies that return the power of money to the people. It means becoming your own bank and reducing your dependency on the debt-based system. It means educating your community about the true nature of the Federal Reserve so that we can collectively demand a return to sound money and honest accounting. The truth is the only thing they cannot suppress. We have been told that the current system is the only way a modern economy can function, but history tells a different story. Great civilizations were built on the back of sound money and productive labor, long before the Federal Reserve was even a dream. The most successful fraud in human history is only successful as long as we continue to believe in it. By reclaiming our understanding of value and refusing to be silent participants in our own exploitation, we can begin to build a future that actually honors the principles of freedom and prosperity for all. The Federal Reserve was never designed to save the economy. It was designed to manage its decline while concentrating the remains in the hands of a few. Adam Smith knew that a nation's true wealth lay in its productivity and its people's freedom, not in the ledger of a central bank. If you have felt like the game is rigged, it is because the very rules of the money you earn are written by those who do not have to earn it. Understanding this trap is the first step toward walking out of it. We recently explored why the social structures built around this debt system are equally fragile and why you should not let the current chaos dictate your peace of mind. You absolutely need to watch our next video titled, "Don't Take the Modern System Too Seriously, Adam Smith." Click the video on your screen now and let us keep deconstructing the matrix together.